After school at Sarah's Snacks. The bell above the door jingled, a cheerful counterpoint to the grumbling in Leo's stomach. He'd practically sprinted from school, his backpack bouncing against his spine with every step, all fueled by the shimmering image of Galactic Gladiators 7 dancing in his head. He needed to rack up the credits, and fast. "Hey, Mom," he called, already heading towards the back. Sarah, perched on a stool behind the counter, beamed at him. "Leo! You're early. Homework all done?" Leo shrugged, grabbing a box of crackers from a towering stack. "Almost. Figured I'd help out first. Galactic Gladiators isn't going to buy itself, you know." Sarah chuckled, a warm, comforting sound that always made the small store feel a little brighter. "Well, I appreciate it, sweetie. Mr. Henderson's been asking if we got those saltines back in stock." Leo attacked the shelves with renewed vigor. He imagined each box of crackers represented a small victory, a tiny step closer to intergalactic domination. He pictured himself wielding a plasma rifle, blasting alien hordes, the cheers of grateful citizens echoing in his ears. The reality of neatly arranging boxes on a shelf felt considerably less glamorous. The first customer of the afternoon shuffled in, a stooped woman with a floral scarf tied tightly around her head. "Afternoon, Sarah," she croaked, her voice raspy. "Mrs. Gable. How are you today?" Sarah called back, her voice instantly softening. "Did you manage to find those rose bushes you were looking for?" Mrs. Gable shook her head, her face etched with disappointment. "Not yet, dear. Maybe next week. Just need my usual cough drops today." Leo watched as Sarah carefully bagged the lozenges, her movements gentle and patient. He noticed how she always asked after Mrs. Gable's garden, even though it was the same conversation every week. Sarah's Snacks wasn't just a store, it was a community hub, a place where people came for more than just groceries. A tall, lanky man with a shock of white hair strode in next, his face crinkled in a permanent squint. He nodded curtly at Sarah and then turned to Leo, his eyes scrutinizing him with unnerving intensity. "You must be Leo," he said, his voice surprisingly deep. "Sarah's told me all about you." Leo, caught off guard, mumbled a greeting. He didn't recognize the man. "Name's Arthur," the man continued, his gaze sweeping over the shelves. "I come in for the licorice. Black, the stronger the better." Arthur's presence was different from Mrs. Gable's quiet melancholy. There was a sharpness about him, a quiet strength that Leo couldn't quite place. Sarah chimed in, her voice bright. "Arthur's quite the history buff, Leo. Knows everything about the war." "War?" Leo's ears perked up. Maybe this guy knew about Galactic Gladiators. "Which war, Mr. Arthur?" "The intergalactic war of..." Arthur cut him off with a dry chuckle. "Son, I'm talking about the real war. The one with bullets and trenches, not lasers and spaceships." Leo felt his cheeks flush. He hadn't meant to sound so childish. Arthur selected a bag of licorice, his fingers gnarled and scarred. He turned back to Leo, a strange glint in his eyes. "You young people don't know how lucky you are. You haven't seen the things I've seen." He paid Sarah, his movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. As he walked out, the bell jingling once more, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something significant, something hidden beneath the surface of everyday life at Sarah's Snacks. He returned to stocking the shelves, his mind no longer filled with images of virtual battles, but with the unsettling intensity of Arthur's gaze and the weight of unspoken memories. Galactic Gladiators 7 suddenly seemed a lot less important. The man with twinkling eyes. The bell above the door jingled, a cheerful interruption to the monotonous afternoon. Leo, who'd been meticulously alphabetizing the gum packets, a task his mom had assigned to curb his fidgeting, glanced up. An elderly man shuffled in, his movements slow but deliberate. He wore a faded blue jacket, several sizes too big, and a worn baseball cap that shadowed his face. Leo watched as the man made his way to the candy aisle, his gaze sweeping over the brightly colored wrappers. He paused, his eyes lingering on a display of chocolate bars. There was something about the way he looked at them, a quiet longing perhaps, that caught Leo's attention. It wasn't the greedy stare of a child wanting a treat, but something softer, more reflective. He was old, no denying that. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line telling a silent story. But it was his eyes that truly captivated Leo. They were a startling shade of blue, bright and clear despite the years etched around them. They twinkled, a gentle, almost mischievous sparkle that hinted at a life well lived, or at least a life fully experienced. Leo abandoned his gum packets, a sudden urge to assist the man bubbling inside him. He'd seen his mom help countless customers over the years, always with a smile and a genuine offer to lend a hand. He figured he could do the same. "Can I help you find something, sir?" Leo asked, approaching the man with a friendly grin. The man turned, his twinkling eyes focusing on Leo. A small smile played on his lips. "Just browsing, son. Thank you, though." His voice was raspy, like dried leaves crunching underfoot. Leo lingered, unsure whether to leave or stay. "We have some new caramel bars in the back. Just came in this morning. They're really good, my mom says." He gestured vaguely towards the back of the store. The man chuckled, a soft, wheezing sound. "I think I'll stick with these for now." He reached out a gnarled hand and gently picked up a Hershey's bar. "Sometimes, the classics are the best." Leo nodded, feeling a strange sense of connection with this quiet stranger. He noticed the man's hands were trembling slightly. "Need help reaching anything on the top shelf?" No. "I'm all right," the man replied, his gaze fixed on the candy bar in his hand. He seemed lost in thought, his brow furrowed slightly. Leo sensed he was intruding. "Okay. Well, if you need anything, just let me know. I'm Leo." He pointed to his name tag, then started to walk away, back towards his gum packets. "Arthur," the man replied, almost as an afterthought. "Arthur Peterson." Leo paused, turning back. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Peterson." He gave a small wave and then busied himself with the gum, but his mind was no longer on alphabetizing. He kept glancing back at Mr. Peterson, drawn in by the mystery of the man with the twinkling eyes. He wondered what stories those eyes held, what experiences had shaped the lines on his face. He felt an odd premonition, a sense that this encounter was more significant than it seemed. A pocket full of pennies. Arthur Peterson shuffled down the candy aisle, his gaze lingering on the rows of brightly colored wrappers. He paused at a Hershey's bar, its promise of creamy chocolate a comforting thought. He picked it up, turning it over in his wrinkled hands as if examining a priceless artifact. Behind the counter, Leo Maxwell leaned against the lottery ticket display, boredom nipping at his heels. He'd already alphabetized the gum packets twice and reorganized the miniature toys by color. His mom, Sarah, was in the back, wrestling with a jammed paper shredder. He was supposed to be watching the front, but the only excitement so far had been Mrs. Henderson's endless debate about the merits of different brands of cat food. He watched the old man clutching the chocolate bar. Mr. Peterson was a regular, always impeccably dressed in tweed jackets and polished shoes, but he moved with a slow, deliberate grace that suggested a fragility Leo didn't quite understand. Finally, Mr. Peterson made his way to the counter. He placed the chocolate bar down with a soft thump. "Just this today, young man," he said, his voice raspy but kind. Leo punched in the code. "That'll be $1.50. Mr. Peterson reached for his wallet, a worn leather thing that looked older than Leo's dad. He opened it with trembling fingers and peered inside. He pulled out a few crumpled bills, then stopped, his brow furrowing in concentration. He started digging deeper, his movements growing increasingly frantic. A small avalanche of receipts, faded photographs, and business cards tumbled onto the counter. Leo shifted his weight. $1.50 shouldn't be this difficult. He caught a glimpse of Sarah emerging from the back room, her face smudged with toner. Mr. Peterson continued his search, his breath growing shallow. He pulled out a small, zippered pouch and cautiously opened it. Leo craned his neck. It was filled with pennies. An awful lot of pennies. He leaned closer to Sarah as she approached the register. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I think that guy's going to try to pay with pennies." He rolled his eyes. "Seriously?" Sarah followed his gaze to Mr. Peterson, who was now carefully counting out the copper coins. She frowned, but it wasn't the frown Leo expected. It wasn't an impatient, get this over with, frown. It was something else. Something that made Leo feel a tiny prickle of unease. Mr. Peterson finished counting. He looked up at Leo, his eyes filled with a mixture of apology and embarrassment. "I do hope this is all right, young man. I seem to be a bit short on larger denominations today." He pushed the pile of pennies towards Leo. "There should be 150 there." Leo stared at the pile, then at Mr. Peterson's hopeful face. He felt a flush creep up his neck. He hadn't considered the possibility that the old man was actually short on money. He'd just assumed, well, he wasn't sure what he'd assumed. Only that it was going to be a hassle. Kindness is always in season. Leo leaned against the counter, the boredom a thick, suffocating blanket. Another Tuesday, another parade of faces, each one more forgettable than the last. He watched Mr. Peterson shuffle toward the register, his worn tweed jacket smelling faintly of mothballs and pipe tobacco. The old man clutched a single chocolate bar, its foil wrapper crinkled at the edges. "Just this, young man," Mr. Peterson rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Leo scanned the bar. "That'll be $1.37. Mr. Peterson fumbled in his pockets, his movement slow and deliberate. He counted out coins onto the counter, his brow furrowed in concentration. Pennies, nickels, a few dimes. When he finished, he looked up at Leo, a sheepish expression on his face. "I seem to be a few cents short," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Leo sighed inwardly. "Of course." He glanced at the growing line behind Mr. Peterson. Impatience radiated from them like heat from an oven. He opened his mouth to tell the old man to put something back, but a voice stopped him. "Leo, kindness is always in season," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. She stood beside him, her smile radiating genuine warmth. She was shelving candy bars, her movements quick and efficient. She had a knack for knowing when someone needed a little help. Leo scowled. He hated being lectured, especially in front of customers. Sarah ignored his expression. She turned to Mr. Peterson, her smile widening. "It's no problem at all, sir. I've got it covered." She reached into her own apron pocket and dropped 3 pennies onto the counter. "There you go," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Have a wonderful day." Mr. Peterson's face lit up, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening with his smile. "Oh, thank you, miss," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's very kind of you." He took the chocolate bar and shuffled away, offering Sarah another grateful smile as he passed. Leo watched him go, a strange feeling twisting in his gut. It wasn't guilt, exactly, but something akin to it. Shame, maybe. He'd been so quick to judge, so eager to move on to the next customer, that he'd forgotten the simple act of extending a little grace. "See, Leo," Sarah said quietly, turning back to her work. "It doesn't cost much to be kind." He mumbled something under his breath, avoiding her gaze. He rang up the next customer, his movements mechanical. But the image of Mr. Peterson's grateful smile stayed with him, a small seed of something new planting itself in his heart. It was a feeling he couldn't quite name, but it felt a lot like empathy. He wondered if maybe, just maybe, Sarah was right. Maybe kindness was always in season. The grumpy customer. Mr. Peterson's gnarled fingers wrestled with his time-worn wallet, struggling to extract enough bills. A lone chocolate bar sat on the counter, its flashy packaging a beacon against the backdrop of his faded coat and weary posture. Leo, distracted moments before by the internal drafting of a scathing critique of the latest superhero blockbuster, now felt a disquieting prickle of conscience. The transaction was taking an eternity. Behind the elderly man, a figure sculpted in an expensive suit tapped a manicured finger against the glass of the candy display. The harsh overhead lights amplified each precise click of his pen. Leo feigned absorption in straightening a leaning tower of magazines. At long last, Mr. Peterson arranged a meager collection of worn currency and spare coins on the polished surface. He tallied it with painstaking care, his lips forming the silent numbers. He was short. A wave of crimson washed over his throat, disappearing into the worn collar of his shirt. I seem to be a little short, he murmured, his voice a fragile thing lost in the drone of the refrigerators. The suited man exhaled loudly, a sound laced with exasperation. Seriously? Holding up the line for a chocolate bar? Some of us actually value our time. Mr. Peterson recoiled, his shoulders bowing even further inward. He began gathering his meager funds, his movements laced with hesitation and apology. A wave of unexpected shame crashed over Leo. Only moments ago, he'd silently condemned this man, painting him with the brush of assumption. Now, witnessing his obvious mortification, he felt a sharp pang of regret. He yearned to vanish. "It's nothing, sir," Leo interjected, perhaps a touch too emphatically. "My treat." He reached towards the tempting confection, but Mr. Peterson stayed his hand. "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly allow that," he demurred, his eyes flitting nervously towards the impatient suit. I'll return at another time." He turned to leave, his back straightening with a surprising resilience, a whisper of dignity clinging to him despite his earlier slump. The man in the tailored suit intercepted him, blocking his exit. "Listen, I'm already behind schedule because of this ludicrous hold-up. Either pay for the damn thing or put it back. Some of us have pressing matters to attend to." He threw a scalding glance at Leo, then back to Mr. Peterson, his face coloring with indignation. The atmosphere in the cramped store seemed to congeal, thickening with animosity. The aroma of day-old coffee emanating from the corner machine suddenly felt oppressive. Leo's palms grew slick. He despised the contemptuous gaze the suited man leveled at both him and Mr. Peterson. He loathed his own complicity, the silent judgment that had contributed to this tableau. Mr. Peterson remained immobile, his grip tightening on his wallet. Silence descended, broken solely by the mechanical pulse of the nearby ice cream freezer. Leo recognized the urgency of the moment. He had to act, anything to shatter the suffocating tension. A glimmer of honor. Leo leaned against the checkout counter, the rhythmic beep of the scanner a monotonous soundtrack to his boredom. Another slow Tuesday afternoon at Marty's Minimart. He stifled a yawn, idly watching Mr. Peterson shuffle towards him, a single Hershey bar clutched in his wrinkled hand. Leo had pegged him as one of the regulars who probably pieced together their grocery money from spare change. But then, something caught his eye. Pinned to the lapel of Mr. Peterson's worn tweed jacket, nestled amongst the frayed fabric and a dusting of what looked like flour, was a medal. Purple. Leo straightened up, his gaze drawn ineluctably to it. It was a purple heart. The enameled purple heart, edged with gold, hung from a ribbon of dark purple with white stripes. It wasn't new, the metal was tarnished, the ribbon faded with age, almost blending into the muted tones of the jacket. A tiny scratch marred the smooth surface of the heart itself, like a silent tear. Mr. Peterson placed the chocolate bar on the counter with a soft thud. "Just this today, son." His voice was raspy, each word a little effort. Leo, usually quick to ring up the item and offer a perfunctory "have a good one," found himself momentarily speechless. He picked up the candy bar, his fingers brushing against the cold foil wrapper. The price flashed on the screen, $1.25, a pittance. He glanced back at the medal. The light filtering through the dusty front window glinted off the tarnished gold, casting dancing shadows on the man's face. Lines etched by time and hardship were softened, momentarily, by an unexpected dignity. Leo swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "That'll be $1.25, sir." He felt a strange pull, a burgeoning curiosity that pricked at his usual indifference. Where had Mr. Peterson served? What had he seen? What sacrifice had earned him that medal? As Mr. Peterson fumbled in his pocket for the money, Leo noticed his hands. They were gnarled and spotted with age, but surprisingly strong. He imagined those hands, once younger, perhaps holding a rifle, bandaging a wound, writing a letter home. The old man counted out the coins, his brow furrowed in concentration. He came up short. "Darn," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Thought I had enough." Leo's mind raced. He could cover the difference himself. It was just a few cents. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the story behind the medal, the story etched on the old man's face. He wanted to know. He needed to know. He cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, his voice a little rougher than intended, "that's a very impressive medal you have there." He hoped he didn't sound too intrusive. Mr. Peterson looked up, his blue eyes, faded with age, widened slightly. A flicker of something, pride? Pain? Crossed his face before being quickly masked by a weary smile. "Just a trinket, son. A long time ago." He paused, then added with a hint of resignation, "Don't worry about the change, I'll just put it back." He reached for the chocolate bar. Leo's hand shot out, gently covering Mr. Peterson's. "No, no, sir. It's on me. Please. And if you don't mind me asking, what did you do to earn it?" "A story of courage." Leo leaned against the counter, the fluorescent lights of the Minimart buzzing overhead. Mr. Peterson shuffled forward, placing a single Hershey bar on the conveyor belt. Leo scanned it with a listless flick of his wrist. The man's hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with a handful of crumpled bills. Leo had mentally pegged him as a nuisance the moment he walked in, another slow customer holding up the line. He couldn't help but notice the faded denim jacket and worn shoes. Judging him before knowing him, he knew. But Leo was bored. "That'll be $150, Leo mumbled, already anticipating the struggle with the change. Mr. Peterson counted out the bills slowly, his brow furrowed in concentration. He laid the last dollar on the counter, then a scattering of coins. He came up short. A flush crept up his neck. I seem to be a little short." Before Leo could sigh dramatically, his eyes caught on something pinned to the man's jacket, a tarnished Bronze Star medal. "What's that for?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Mr. Peterson's fingers brushed the medal. He straightened a little. That's a long story, son." He paused, then, as if deciding to indulge a memory, he continued. "Korea. Winter of '52. We were pinned down. Outnumbered. The enemy was dug in on the ridge, and we were taking heavy fire. Our medic was hit, bad. He was screaming. Nobody wanted to go out there. Too dangerous." Mr. Peterson's voice was low, almost a whisper, his eyes far away. Leo found himself captivated, forgetting the line forming behind him. "I couldn't stand it. The screaming, the waiting. So, I went. Crawled on my belly through the snow. Bullets whizzing past my head. Got to him, dragged him back to the trench. He lived. That's all that matters." The air in the Minimart seemed to thicken. The buzzing of the lights faded into the background. Leo could almost feel the biting wind, the crunch of snow, the fear. A gruff voice broke the spell. "HMPH War Stories." A man with a shaved head and a scowl stood behind Mr. Peterson, arms crossed. "Always gotta be a hero, don't you?" Mr. Peterson didn't react, his gaze still lost in the past. Leo, however, felt a surge of anger. "He's not bragging," he snapped, surprising himself. "He's just telling it." The shaved-headed man scoffed, but Leo ignored him. He looked back at Mr. Peterson, whose shoulders seemed to slump slightly. "I'll cover the rest," Leo said, reaching into his own pocket and dropping a few coins into the till. "It's on me." Mr. Peterson looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, son. That's very kind of you." He took the chocolate bar and turned to leave. As Mr. Peterson shuffled towards the door, the shaved-headed man cleared his throat. "Hey, old-timer," he said, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. "Sorry about that. Didn't mean anything by it." He pulled out a $5 bill and thrust it towards Mr. Peterson. "Here. Get yourself something else." Mr. Peterson paused, looked at the bill, then back at the man. A faint smile touched his lips. "Thank you," he said again, accepting the money. He turned and walked out into the afternoon sun. Leo watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions, shame for his earlier judgment, respect for the old man's quiet courage, and a flicker of hope for humanity. The grumpy customer was quiet now, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. The weight of the buzzing light seemed a little lighter. From apology to gratitude. Leo gnawed at his inner cheek, his gaze fixed on the elderly man at register 3, struggling to untangle a wad of well-worn currency. A pang of guilt, unwelcome and sharp, pierced through him. He'd been so quick with his assessment, too ready to write off Mr. Peterson as merely another slow-paced obstacle, a miserly annoyance slowing down the queue. He even recalled sharing a smirk with Sarah when the man, in his faded coat, had grumbled about the price of confectionery upon entering. A throat clearing behind him yanked him back to the present. It was the earlier malcontent, the one who'd loudly bemoaned the absence of organic kale, now standing awkwardly, color rising in his face. "Excuse me," he mumbled, his tone remarkably subdued. "Mr. Peterson? I wanted to say I'm sorry. I overreacted." That outburst was uncalled for. Mr. Peterson's gaze lifted, his eyes magnified behind thick lenses. "Water under the bridge, son," he replied, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "We all have our moments." Relief seemed to wash over the man, softening his features. "Thank you. I feel awful about it." Sarah, having just finished assisting a customer at her station, observed the exchange, her expression thoughtful. Once the shopper departed, she approached Mr. Peterson's register. "Mr. Peterson," she began, her voice soft. "Please, let me take care of that." She reached for the chocolate bar. Mr. Peterson demurred. "Oh, nonsense, dear. My treat." "Please," Sarah insisted, "consider it a small thank you for your service." She knew of his military past, recalling the worn veteran's cap he occasionally wore. And, well, everyone deserves a little joy. Mr. Peterson's eyes grew moist. He started to protest, but Sarah gently interjected. "I mean it. And how about we add a few extras to that bag? Just a small token of our appreciation." She indicated the vibrant display of produce nearby. Mr. Peterson's gaze flicked from Sarah to the humble contents of his basket, the chocolate, day-old bread, and a solitary, slightly marred apple. He hesitated, before a slow smile illuminated his face. "Well, now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's awfully generous of you, dear. Truly generous." Swiftly, Sarah began replenishing his bag with groceries, eggs, bananas, sliced ham. Leo, still grappling with his own lapse in judgment, watched silently, a knot of shame and admiration tightening in his chest. He longed to speak, to offer his own apology, but the words remained trapped in his throat. As Sarah finished packing, Mr. Peterson reached out and gently patted her hand. "Thank you, my dear," he said, his voice a soft rasp. "You've brightened an old man's day." Turning to Leo, he offered a courteous nod. "And thank you, young man, for your consideration." As Mr. Peterson walked out of the store, his posture seemed to have straightened, his stride infused with newfound lightness. Though the setting sun cast a lengthening shadow, it seemed in that moment, he carried his own inner illumination. Chocolate bars and shared stories. The buzzing lamps of Maxwell's Market formed a tedious drone, the soundtrack to Leo's sluggish afternoon. Propped against the checkout, he thumbed through his phone, barely acknowledging the wizened figure inching toward his register. Mr. Peterson, the name tag suggested, was a daily fixture, his purchase invariably the same, a solitary Hershey's bar. Leo wondered, not for the first time, if the man's dentures could truly manage the treat. The chocolate landed on the counter with a soft thump, near hand speckled and mapped with age. From a time-worn wallet, Mr. Peterson extracted a clutch of crumpled bills and jangling change. Leo tamped down a sigh. Here we go again, he internally groaned, the coin-counting ritual. He pasted on a practiced smile, one devoid of genuine warmth. Mr. Peterson counted with painstaking care, brow deeply furrowed. A couple of pennies skittered away, disappearing onto the linoleum. Leo's manufactured smile tightened another notch. No rush, he offered, the words laced with impatience. A faint blush rose on the old man's cheeks. Sorry, son. Just, things are a little tough. Leo's phone vibrated. A party invite from a friend flared his restlessness. Reluctantly, he looked back to find Mr. Peterson on all fours, retrieving the errant coins. Something subtle shifted within Leo, a hairline fracture in the shell of his youthful apathy. He registered the tremor in the weathered hands, the etched weariness of the face, and a faint, unfamiliar pang resonated within. Guilt, perhaps? Or simply a flicker of common decency? He knelt beside him, gathering the remaining bits of currency. Let me help. Their fingers briefly connected, and Leo noticed the thickened calluses, a testament to a life of labor. He stood, offering a steadying hand. Thank you kindly, son. I appreciate that. Mr. Peterson's eyes, though dimmed by years, reflected a glint of sincere gratitude. Leo completed the transaction, his movements now measured and mindful. As Mr. Peterson gathered his belongings, Leo spotted a small bag at his feet, basic provisions, bread and soup. Essentials, no more. Let me take that for you, Leo offered, reaching for the bag. He accompanied Mr. Peterson to the entrance, the silence now possessing a comfortable quality. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast elongated shadows. Mr. Peterson paused. Thanks again, Leo. You're a good lad. He unwrapped his Hershey's bar, snapped it in half, and extended a piece to Leo. Care to partake? A moment of hesitation, then a smile. Sure. They stood together, enjoying the quiet, savoring the chocolate. So, Leo began, a chocolate bar every day, huh? Mr. Peterson chuckled, a dry, reedy sound. Habit, I reckon. Takes me back. During the war, we'd have given anything for a little chocolate. A taste of home, you see. Leo's eyes widened slightly. You were in the war. The thought hadn't crossed his mind. He'd just seen an old man with a sweet tooth. Mr. Peterson nodded, his gaze drifting to some distant horizon. He began to reminisce about his time in the Pacific Theater, tales of courage and adversity, of camaraderie and heartbreaking loss. Leo listened, spellbound, the chocolate suddenly feeling richer, imbued with meaning. As the day surrendered to evening, painting the sky with strokes of fire, Leo understood his misjudgment of Mr. Peterson. He was far more than a senior citizen with a candy craving. He was a veteran, a survivor, a purveyor of stories. And perhaps, now, a friend. Time for me to be getting along, Mr. Peterson said, his voice thick with fatigue. Thank you for the company, Leo. Anytime, Mr. Peterson, Leo responded, his smile genuine at last. Anytime. He watched Mr. Peterson amble down the street, the modest grocery swaying gently. Leo re-entered the store, the hum of the lights now sounding less like a relentless drone and more like a soft, persistent reminder. He had a party to attend, but for the first time all day, boredom had lost its grip. He felt altered. As if he'd learned something real. And it possessed a flavor far superior to chocolate.